Welcome.
Welcome back to the next episode of Baltimore Full Circle. We're sitting down with a good friend of mine, Matt Cooper. If you don't know him, you should get to know him. And you probably know him, though. I mean, everyone knows the Cooper. I mean, you guys have been in what, for 100 years?
100 years. 101. Who's counting?
101 years, man. That's probably like, when most of the properties in Baltimore were built. Probably selling the first development deal.
Yeah, we maybe we can do some B-roll. I have some good black and white photos of my family back in the day. It's really, yeah, I'm on Baltimore City. Everybody's in their suits and top hats and all the cars from the 1940s and 50s, and it's pretty cool.
That's crazy. One second. So, how did your family get to Baltimore? I'm assuming no one starts off in Baltimore.
They immigrated from Ukraine.
Oh, wow.
They immigrated from Ukraine, and our name originally was Kupsov, and they Americanized it to Cooper. And there are some Kupsovs in Baltimore somewhere. I don't know them, but my uncle Paul told me that there are. So, we immigrated. That's how we got here.
Wow. It's actually, I never knew that you were originally Ukrainian, like your very grandfather, whatever it is. All my grandparents are either Russian, Ukrainian,
Okay.
and it just depends on when they were born or where they were born at the time, because the border at the time was just constantly shifting. Yeah. So, like, where they're born at the time was considered Russia, and today is considered Ukraine.
Got it.
So, it's just like
I forget the town. I have it all somewhere, but yeah, but that's how we got over. And my great grandfather Alex started doing auctions, and then here we are.
wow. So how did I mean, I'm sure you guys probably have a whole history page on your website. I guess you go through not the whole page, but some of it had like how did he get into auctioning? What was like
Yeah, so I think originally he knew a lot of attorneys and judges. So they started off doing estate sales, bankruptcies, foreclosures, a lot of legal stuff. And I think what happened with that, because what we'll talk about later today, what you and I do when we work together, um, the same investors that buy those types of properties also, have a lot of property. Most property is not in some sort of distress. So they said, "Hey, you do a great job at this. Well, I've got this. Why don't you look at it and sell it?" And so that's how we got into internally in our company, we call it voluntary auctions. We don't say that to people because they're like, "What's a voluntary auction?" Right? But yeah, there's no distress attached to it. It's just somebody looking to sell their property, and they like the auction method, and they know that we can get it done.
right.
So
And if I think like you said, we're gonna probably get more into the difference between a bank owned or an REO type of deal that you guys work with versus a voluntary auction, which is a lot what we work with together
right.
quite a bit. Um, Beautiful. So he started this and then it really grew to what it is today, and it's pretty much a family-run and owned company.
So it's family owned. I mean, at this point, there's maybe like of 50 people, 50 employees, there's maybe 5 or 6 family members. So
Wow. I don't feel like there's 50 employees when I talk to you guys.
we have the fine art division, which is a total another division. So which you wouldn't be working on that. I don't really work on that on a day to day. We have other people that run that. And then we have the foreclosure division, and then we have the real estate division.
Interesting. So your foreclosure division that deals specifically with banks that are foreclosing on property
Correct.
is set like you do, so you don't deal as much with the foreclosure division?
I do personally. I just don't deal with the fine art division that much on a daily basis.
Got it. I have heard of the fine art division. I was talking to Gregory Kamenetz from
Sure. Yeah, yeah. I see him at our auction house all the time.
yeah, he told me I mean I went to his house and I sat down with him there and he has some really nice pieces in his house.
Yeah.
So he told me he buys stuff from auction. And that's a very good business here. I mean, I remember when I was selling a house at some point, and I used to do specifically single families. And I saw this guy have like record boxes, and we are just basically throwing it to the trash. In my head, I'm like, some of these are in very good condition. And I wonder, like, what's the real value for some of the stuff here that we're just completely trashing?
Yeah, I mean, we have specialists. I mean, we have jewelry, furniture, uh, decorative arts, so bronzes, lamps, and Yeah, it's all art. We do modern art. I mean, it's interesting with real estate selling a house, say, versus selling an apartment building is actually much more similar than a watch versus a painting. You know, it's like the skill and knowledge and experience, we just have so many specialists in that business because it just, what does a painting have to do with a watch? Or wait, where is it? What is a lamp have to do with a piece of jewelry? It just there's no.
And you guys have a lot of third party like authentication that
Or sometimes I think we mainly do it ourselves. I mean, yeah, the gold and that kind of stuff, we have machines and but yeah, I mean, if it's something heavy duty, they'll bring in a third party authenticator.
wow. You see, I never really talked to you about this part of the business, and now we're talking about it now.
Yeah, but that's very, very. I don't remember the real estate watchers.
Everyone else with this, yeah. But if you have some random stuff sticking around your house from your grandma, you never know. You might as well get them up and see what it's worth.
Yeah.
Awesome. So getting really into the real estate, I mean, you guys been here for 101 years. Talk to us a little bit more about kind of what you've seen and how Baltimore progressed. When did you specifically get into it? And then from there, I guess tell us more about what you've seen in the market over the years that you've been involved.
Yeah, so I have really been working at Alex Cooper probably since I've been 12 or 13 or 14. So I mean, a long time. I would say that really full time when I got into real estate was right after college. So 2005 is when I really got into it. And in 2005, things were on a crazy upswing. That was right before the financial crisis. So and also we didn't really do things online then. So we used to have these, we called them gallery sales, and we had a lot of landlords that owned portfolios. Some people were three, four, five properties, but a lot of them had 100 properties.
Wow.
Long time Baltimore landlords, and that they saw the frenzy, and every 4 weeks or so we would sell about 100 properties.
To who? Who is coming in at that point?
A lot of people from New York, Philadelphia, DC, uh, locals. I'll never forget. Yeah, I mean, I don't want to make fun of any customer, but they came up to me after an auction. Again, keep in mind all this is in person, and they go, "Is North Avenue a good street?" And I'm like, because we would just show photos of the front of the property.
Right.
Now, sometimes we would show the, interior photos, but most of the time we wouldn't. People just took our word for it about the leases. Yeah, I mean, we'll get into it a little bit down the line here about, the diligence materials, but when you buy a property at auction, you're buying it as is, where is, no contingencies on financing, inspection, appraisal, certainly a different way of buying. And so people just trusted us, that we do our diligence, and but it was I certainly don't foresee anything like that ever again. I mean, that was wild times.
It kind of reminds you, does it remind you at all like 2021? Like that,
No, that was crazier.
really?
That was crazier.
2005? Was that
Yeah,
crazy?
but for me, I mean, maybe not. Yeah, I mean, just from my view, through my eyes, that was it. Just was wild. I mean, people were just anybody could get loans. I mean, the gears were very well lubricated. I mean, you just put down, your 15, 20%, and I think a lot of it too in Baltimore at the time when we were working with Bank of America was a big one. I mean, they had a certain quota to meet, for doing these types of loans, and so they looked at us as a factory kind of to produce those. And we had a representative from Bank of America that actually would come to our gallery, and we would have title companies, we would have insurance companies, a lot of trusted vendors that we still work with today. Steve Larray, I remember, was back there. Brian Rax with New Rail Title. I've known all these guys for my whole career, and they've known my family longer. And yeah, again, everything was in person then. So it just I'm like aging myself here. I'm 41. I'm not that old, but it really was different. I mean, yeah, I mean, we had email and everything, but online auctions were not really something that was done very much.
It's interesting because I feel like now that there is online auctions, it's probably a lot more efficient on your time and in general, just to put it on the site, get everyone to see it.
I think it's better. I mean, e-commerce, I don't think we have to debate, what that's changed in society. I think everybody buys on Amazon or,
eBay, I remember when eBay was the main. I remember when I was
eBay is so huge. eBay is monstrous.
see, I remember at the time when eBay and Amazon are like in the same level in a way, like in 2000 and probably 8. And then all of a sudden, Amazon just became like this, like a Nike of online shopping.
Oh my God.
And eBay became like a Dunkin' Donuts or a Family Dollar of online shopping. You know what I'm saying?
Oh, I mean, it's different. I mean, it's one's auction and one is uh people are utilizing the platform to sell their items, and Amazon is more of a retailer.
Correct. Correct. At this point.
Yeah.
It's interesting to me actually, because I would think that in-person auctions end up getting you higher prices because you have people there and like in-person bidding against each other. Did you see that that actually produced more, or do you see that you have more control when you're on the website?
So I believe that overall the online bidding produces more prices, a higher price, simply because it creates more competition. Uh, I also think to a certain extent, a lot of people that are buying property at auction are not, auction buyers. I mean, do I have auction buyers? Absolutely. I mean, we have, good customers that we work with on a continuing, basis, and they know the drill. But most of the time, the people that I'm working with, find the property. They might find it on our platform, they might find it on yours, or find it on NewtNet or wherever. Maybe they see a sign and they want to buy the property. And we're like, okay, it's going up for auction. I guess I have to jump through this hoop and I have to do the auction. And, everybody's busy, everybody's time is valuable. And I think everybody is used to e-commerce at this point. I think, again, we went online in about 2015. We had dabbled with it before then. But really, when we went full speed into it was 2015. And really kind of stopped doing on the premises auctions for voluntary auctions in 2017. It's about when we kind of had 2 years of hybrid, and then we realized, why are we doing it like this? But anyway, uh, I think people that are bidding online, uh, our platform is what's called a soft close. So now I'm really getting into some nuts and bolts, but it's called a soft close platform. So the bidding, if there's any bids under 3 minutes, which there almost always is, the clock resets to 3 minutes. I think that gives people a lot of time to breathe. I mean, when you're doing it on the premises auction, going once, going twice, third and final call, and I'm getting in your face, and everybody's looking at you. I mean, if a lot of people don't like that. But, I mean,
Pressuring.
it's a lot of pressure. So I find that the online bidding, it increases the accessibility, and it reduces the pressure to make a decision that works. If you're working with a spouse or a partner, or you're just trying to crunch your numbers, you can't do that when you're standing out in front of a property and you have 10 seconds to bid. If you just got outbid, now you have 3 minutes to take a look at it. um, that it gives you a lot more time to think about making a decision. And, I'm sure we've lost some bids where people might have make it, but we don't want people making bids that they don't want to make.
That's true.
Yeah, I mean, the auction has a time is of the essence to it, and it is a pressure cooker at the end. I mean, to describe it as something else, probably wouldn't be fair. I mean, there is pressure, but go into it prepared. Go into it, which we'll talk about this down the line. Go into it with a number you have in mind. If you want to push it a little bit, push it a little bit. But I would say overall, stick to your number. I mean, there's all sorts of reasons why somebody can pay more than you. So maybe that's not the one.
Correct. And I think that's actually something as a broker over time I learned when I used to look at certain sale prices for properties. And this actually started way back when I was selling a lot more single family portfolios. And you go on the MLS and you look at comps, and the comp just doesn't make any sense. And a good example of this would be CR of Maryland, right?
Sure.
So the way that they have it structured, which I'm not going to get into detail, essentially, when you see comps that are very high in certain areas, a lot of the time when you look at the description, you'll see that the broker that sold it was CR of Maryland, right? And then you from there you already know that CR of Maryland is set up a source item fund and whatever it is, the whole story there. But that price makes sense for what they are doing, right?
Yeah.
And then also vice versa. I've seen owners that overpay for properties in a consistent manner. And I told myself these prices don't make sense. I don't know how they're still buying and buying and buying. And you know what? I'm seeing these properties being listed today. It's been 2 years since some of these owners bought, and you were right in those cases. I was right, but at the time though, like if you're seeing so many properties selling at a certain price point, even though rates are low in 2021, like they're low, but and maybe rents went up 10, 14% from then until now, but still like how much more are you going to pay for a property, right? Like I always tell people, in my personal opinion, Mount Vernon is a beautiful area, right? And people buy there typically love the historic part of it. But when you look at rents, like what are you getting for your unit? In my opinion, Northeast Baltimore gives you more rent per unit than Mount Vernon, and their properties values are selling for less. Mount Vernon will sell for 125, and Northeast Baltimore will sell for 85 to 90 to maybe 100 a unit. Now, in Mount Vernon, for a one bedroom, you're getting maybe it depends on the finishes, maybe like 13, 1400. You're getting the same rent from subsidy in Northeast Baltimore, yet people are paying so much more.
It's a business model. I mean, it depends what you wanna do. We kinda had an agenda to talk about, but I feel like it's a good time to bring up, um, one pitfall that I see with Baltimore is that Baltimore deals look great on paper. They look great,
Right.
and you see the rent roll and you're like, "Wow." This is a home run. And that's where it comes down to property management and really either having a third party property manager or knowing what you're doing. The people that I see that are the most successful have an economies of scale to where they can have their own staff. Uh, you know, Kind of the first jump where I would say somebody could pay more than somebody else um, would be, and I'm really talking about boutique buildings here, you know, 30 unit buildings, 20 unit buildings, 50 unit buildings, whatever, somewhere in that range. But you start getting to 80, 120, 150 units, and you start having on-site managers. I think that it's a different game at that point. But if you are going into the apartment building game, and you're starting, you have a bunch of single families, or maybe you're just jumping right into a 3 unit or a 5 unit. Um, if somebody already owns a bunch of buildings in that area and they have their own team, they have uh, contractors that they work with, or maybe they even have a handyman on staff. Their NOI, which is such a deeply personal number, it's also something I want to tell. I mean, when I advertise my properties at auction, I don't like putting NOI. And I don't know any other broker that does that. But I put select expenses that are going to be the same from one owner to the next, because coming up with an NOI on a 15 unit building from one person to the next, depending on all these different variables, you have to crunch your own numbers and come up with your own NOI. You just have to. Um, but anyway, back to the economies of scale. Once you have enough units to not have a third party management company and bring on a team, or even just one person, everything changes for you, because then you're not, what's a property management firm on a small, anywhere between what, 5 and 8%, 5 to 10%,
5 and 8%.
5 and 8%. I mean, that could be all your juice. That could be your whole profit margin right there. So somebody could easily pay more than you. Another thing that you can do is, if you start getting enough buildings, you can refi into a Fannie Freddie loan and start getting much better terms than, under $1 million properties absolutely can be financed, but the terms are not going to be as favorable as if you're doing a $1 million plus transaction, but just not.
Correct. No, I think that specifically in general, also today, I think deals that are under $1 million, you could get financed, but it's a lot harder than it used to be. Like versus above a million, like you say, go eight.
It's local banks.
Yeah.
President's Bank, Bay Vanguard, uh, Sandy Spring. I mean, there's a lot of banks that will do it. And it's great, work with the bank that you have a relationship with. But if you want to get into it, you definitely wanna get that Fannie Freddie money. I mean, it's just the agency loans have much better terms than what the local banks can do.
100%. Yeah, that's really where the deals how the deals make sense really with agency debt. Yeah, and really to touch on what you're saying about third party, I think together what you're saying, people pay so much for third parties, but I've seen so many scenarios where they're paying so much for third parties, and the reason they're failing is because of the third parties. And I give you an example. I have a listing that I worked on, and the owner sent me his T12, kind of like what you were saying earlier, and the numbers didn't make sense to me, and he was making a negative whatever it was on the property, and I don't know it. No, not at all, and for him, it didn't make sense to him either, and he reached out to the management company, and they were like, "We don't know where these expenses went to," and when I looked at that NOI, I told him, "Listen, like, we have to figure it out because on a traditional listing, you do need to show NOI. Just that's what the market expects in a way. So we had to work on it and see strategies how to list the property.
Right.
But in that scenario, the guy's paying, let's say, 7, 8% his manager, plus all of the suit charges that they charge him anytime they do a renovation, and they can't give him a proper reporting, and he's making negative income. Like right there, if you had it in house, you would know where the money's going to. You wouldn't get a suit charge, and that deal made sense and it would cash flow well for another investor. And I think that's where, I mean, I think many buildings we did together, a portfolio a little while ago where the properties were in really distressed tenancy scenarios is because they just, at least the owner told us was that they had a management that didn't take care of it and they had to come in from out of state and get someone from out of state to manage them.
Well, look, I mean, yeah, real estate is a business, especially multifamily. If you are looking truly to correct a check, your triple net properties, are the way to go, or buy a REIT stock. Uh, you know, management companies. I think there's a lot of good ones out there, but I still think as an owner, you need to have some sort of active presence. Uh, and over time, probably look to grow to get your own team. But look, if the numbers work and you're happy and you only want it as a certain part of your portfolio, that's fine. But again, I do think where you can pay more than others is when your operating costs go down,
Agreed.
and that,
Agreed.
that allows you to be competitive and pick up the deals.
Correct. And I think one point when it comes to managing that I noticed with good managers, and again, if a manager tells you this doesn't mean they're good, but I see good managers tell me this, is that I'll look at the property you're sending me, but I'm not going to for sure take it on as management.
Sure.
You know what I'm saying? Like, and I think you guys do the same thing with auctions, right? You wouldn't take like if I'm going to call you with the property, doesn't mean you're going to take it for auction, right?
No, I mean, the idea at auction at its core is that through competitive bidding, the market will determine its value. I mean, that is we're a marketplace. Yeah, that is what we do. And with sellers, understandably, they have a number in mind, typically. And what I try to find, because I almost sometimes find I'm getting in negotiations with the seller, and it's like, well, time out. I'm not trying to buy the property. Um, I care about the seller's motivation. I care about their equity. I mean, the good thing about multifamily property, as far as real estate goes, that's commercial real estate. I mean, it's a very liquid type of real estate. I mean, obviously, it's not as liquid as a stock or something like that, but there's a demand. People need a roof over their head. People need a place to live, and quality, safe housing. I just think it's going to be here. You could have all the Amazons and eBays and everything. I mean, it's I think it's a great asset. But with the sellers, when I'm talking to them, I do want to understand their mind a little bit and say, does this methodology of sale provide value to making your decision? I mean, because people love from the seller side, they love that it's as is. They love that there's no contingencies on financing, inspections, appraisals. They like that there was a time frame. So we typically market the properties 3 weeks to 30 days, and then for apartment buildings, I do 60-day closing. Smaller buildings, I'll do 45. Like the Madison one we just did, I did a 45-day close. But let's use the Madison one for example, just because it's fresh from both of our minds. This is through a 5 Us Madison we just sold together. When we were working with the seller at the end, he saw that we had, I think we had 7 or 8, 9 registered bidders, something like that. There was active bidding, and where it landed, frankly, was less than his expectation, but he was happy, because he felt comfortable that the property had maximum exposure. He saw that people were bidding, and, he got an offer with these terms, and he said, "Let's do it. Let's go." And, that it should close. It should be good, but that's the that's why I wanna know that ahead of time, does that provide value to you? Because I'm not an oracle, I'm not the last word in real estate. There's people that are probably much better at property valuation than I am, but I do think I'm a good auctioneer. And, so I wanna know, we have that moment of clarity at the end of the auction. Does that mean something to you? And it doesn't mean that in order for us to take the auction, it has to. At the end of the day, I understand and respect that some sellers just wanna get a number, and if they don't get that number, it looks like this is gonna be, given to their grandkids. They're just never gonna sell it if I don't care what the market has to say. I get this number or not. And that's okay. But yeah, in that situation, I might be less likely to take it because I just say, hey, look, I don't think that there's a good chance that we're going to sell this. And I also do want to have respect for our buyers. A lot of work goes into underwriting the transaction and purchasing the property. And if you don't win, you don't win. I mean, that's part of the game in regards to the auction. There's only one person that's going to buy it. But I don't want people coming to my platform and on a consistent basis, winning auctions and not being able to buy them. That's not good. That's not what we're about.
Right, right. No, that would hurt the reputation there, and I think that's very smart, being able to say no. I think there's very likely a hook on probably called being able to say no or the artist saying no, you know? So it's funny in I mean, yes, in this case, but I would say in business, just kind of I'm now the vice president of Alex Cooper, which is exciting news. Thank you. But I've been running the real estate division for a number of years now. I don't know, 4 or 5 years, something like that. And a lot of my job is to say no. It just has to get to somebody, and at some point, you just say no. The bug got to stop. So it's got to stop somewhere. And sometimes people come back. I mean, a lot of times we've, back to working with customers. I mean, sometimes, uh, a broker might come to a property, might come to me with a property and say, hey, I brought up the auction method. I have a relationship with Alex Cooper, and I think we should leverage their platform and work together. And, we'll have a conference call with the seller and go over it with them. And, sometimes I'll just be like, look, I think there was a reason that the hasn't been getting the number that you want. I don't think the market will bear it. Again, it's just my opinion, and sometimes it'll sit out there longer, and you'll get it done. Or they lower their expectations and get it done. And sometimes they say, hey, you know what? I hear what you're saying now. A couple months later, let's give it a shot and see where it goes. And along that vein, if you're thinking about converting your listing to an auction, uh, it's very important on a sale listing. We do now, most of the listings that you work with me on really go right to auction. You bring it up in your listing presentation, or when you feel appropriate to bring it up in listing presentation, and you say, hey, I think this might just want to be something you might want to consider. If it resonates, it resonates. If it doesn't, I never heard from you about it. Exactly.
But if it's a sale listing, which is some of what we sell, is something that's not moving, I think it's very important that do not lower your list price if you're thinking of doing an auction. Because if you haven't gotten that price, my rule of thumb, and it's not always right, but it's just kind of a rule of thumb, is that a buyer will give an offer about within a 10% radius, plus or minus, of what the property is listed at. Beyond that, I think in their mind, they're just like, I'm really wasting my time. Because I know a lot of sellers will say, oh, just tell them to make an offer, tell them to make an offer. And most buyers don't want to be insulting. Most buyers, if they make an offer on a property, they want to buy it. And so they're not going to offer really less than 10%. So the time and the energy, yeah, it's a lot to do. Plus, people don't want to be known as lowballs, and I mean, it's you do this every day. Sometimes emotions run high or whatever, and it's like, why are you wasting my time? And from the buyer's perspective, it's just genuinely that's what it's worth to them. I mean, there's no privilege in buying, especially a multifamily property, and writing the check to own it every month.
Correct. And I think that like with the American dream and the cons, like I think recently there's been such a push to own property that people do that. But they buy, I don't know what they're doing, and they end up like in a scenario where they come back to me or they come back to you and they're like, wait a second.
But especially on smaller buildings, or if it's a single family investment, I mean, at some point you got to make the jump. I mean, there's no silver. You don't know what you don't know, and there's a million different niches and submarkets and angles. Talking about Mount Vernon versus Northeast, that insight. But hey, do you want to work with voucher tenants? That's another business in and of itself. It's great to get the check every month, but there is some baggage that comes with that. Which,
100%.
which if your business model is towards that, it is great, and you can provide quality, affordable housing to people, but it's different than renting to your business professional that lives in Mount Vernon. And uh, one may not be more profitable than the other. It's two paths.
Agreed. I mean, even just own experience for the properties that I own a property also on the east side. And when it comes to getting a tenant, I ended up putting a subsidized tenant in there. But with the process of subsidy, it ended up sitting vacant an extra 3 months, which meant an extra three mortgage payments, essentially, until I got the tenant that I needed. And not because we couldn't find a tenant, not because we didn't even get a tenant, because of the process with subsidy takes so long that if last minute the tenant decides I'm not moving in, that's a month of your time that you could just throw in the garbage. And you were locked in with that tenant for a month. Yeah. And then that
If
point,
you're going to evict somebody and they're not paying, and then if they trash your unit, that's even worse. It's more than a month.
but this scenario is even before they even sign the lease, you have your inspections, you have all the documents you need to submit, and each of this stuff takes about a week each until you fail, then you got to redo it. And twice in a row, I had a tenant that signed up. We got through the end. We're about to sign the lease, and the tenant said, "You know what? I'm staying where I am. I don't want to move." Right? So that is, yeah, that's a very real challenge if you're going to be going that route. But I wait another month. I paid three mortgage payments on the vacancy, and now I have a subsidy tenant that's 100% subsidized. So there is the question of if you would have gone to Mount Vernon with a market tenant, yeah, you would get the tenant right away, a professional tenant, and you don't have to deal with all this garbage to get an extra $200, $100 a month. So that's true. Like that is true. And like you said, you have to just weigh the pro and cons. And I think also, like you're saying, generally speaking,
But there's no guarantee that market tenant could still trash your unit.
right,
There is no disparity body, but I mean, there's no guarantee, obviously.
correct. And even like with the auction process, I think that we had a deer once that we did together where pre-auction I got an offer, we auctioned it, and I think we got like 200 grand more from that specific investor because we did the auction together.
Oh yeah, I remember that. Yeah.
And then I had another deer where we did an auction and then the owner didn't get what he wanted, and then we did it a regular listing and then we did get. I think it just I think a lot of times market environment also like depends. Like if rates are higher or lower, it could change. And that has nothing to do with the platform. But like you said, like nothing is a perfect science, but we do the best that we can to help out owners and help out investors.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things that I love about working with brokers that we do, leverage the platform and we work together, is the transactions that they're bringing to me are transactions that you had a lot of tools in your tool belt. And so the ones that they're bringing through your experience, you feel, whether it be the owner's scenario, whether it be the property, or all of it combined, you're like, hey, I think this is a good tool. I mean, auction is a tool. You have Phillips head screwdrivers, you have flat head screwdrivers, you got hammers, you've got drills. There's all sorts of things depending on what the job is. You need a tool. Sometimes you could use more than one tool. So that's a metaphor that I use a lot in regards to just it's a tool in your tool belt. And I love working with brokers that know our platform, uh, know where we excel, and know where it could be advantageous to our client, and we end up having a really good success rate. And part of that is because it's sifted. The reason that you called me in the first place is because you felt it was a good fit. That in and of itself got rid of, 90% of the people that I would say this isn't a fit for. So it's awesome. Yeah, and I learn from brokers. I mean, I love working. We are kind of a small team, and it's I love working and seeing how different brokers market the properties. It's really cool. It's a fun experience. That's kind of I love working with individual sellers, but I actually like working with brokers more because you team up with great people. I call it the dream team, but I'd say it's fun.
Yeah, and I think also, like, on our platform, one of the things that we're I mean, every brokerage has its own kind of way they do things. For us, one of the things we are very much that we do is that we do work with brokers that have buyer investors. And in some scenarios, it might be that I end up knowing the buyer, but I said, you know what? Like, if you're able to get your buyer to pay you, and I happen to drop the ball on this buyer, and you brought him to the table, I'm not going to cut you out. Like, we have a relationship going. Let's work together. And even, like, in scenarios of auction too, right? If it ends up being someone that I brought to the table, like, no, we worked on this together, and I don't care that, maybe he would only buy it because it was an auction, right? Even though I know the guy, it doesn't mean, you have to sometimes get out of yourself and be able to say that we're working together on this, and that's how you build long-term relationships. 'Cause
Yeah,
like you
I think it's fun. Yeah, I really do. I think it's fun.
and it adds the workload too, right?
It it does, but it's more, I'm only one person, and I've been really fortunate to have a deep bench of mentors, but to have the opportunity to kind of go under the hood and be part of other brokers' teams is just been amazing. I mean, I really think it's helped elevate my skills. I mean, it just seeing really good people doing what they do in lockstep with them is just it's a great opportunity. So I don't know. I like that's been yeah, I've been doing this my whole life. Yeah, sometimes stuff gets, repetitive. This is something that I've really only been doing maybe the last 3 years or so, 4 years, and it kinda started off as I just was friends with a broker, and, it's my buddy, he only really does residential, but my friend Noah Muma, uh, he's like, "Matt, let's tee this up." I'm like, "Noah, there's no way this is gonna be successful." And he's like, "You're too damn negative. What are you talking about? This is gonna do great." And we did, and he kinda got me to believe that we could be a tool for brokers, and, yeah, I learned a lot from him and a lot from you and all the other people that I've worked with. I really, feel fortunate in that regard. Because it's weird because in a way we're kind of frenemies. It's like, at the same time people may call me to sell a property or there may be overlap and yeah, you do have to have a relationship where it's like, if I get a lead from somebody that you introduced me to, I better bring you in.
Yeah, I agree that it gets tricky, but being able to be clear about it and being able to say, "No, this lead," like, I think on both sides, being able to be, in a sense, a man about it and be able to just, not have to, like, be uncomfortable, whatever, just be upfront, I think is what you're able to build a reputation and then really grow with whoever you're working with. Yeah, every deal is just one deal, and then there could be multiple deals coming after that.
Yeah, but I do think truly for the seller, they're getting the dream team. They're getting 2 teams going after it. I mean, that's a lot. I mean, it's I think the reason our success rate's high, I don't know I've never calculated it, but my guess is it's, 8 or 9 out of 10 or something like that. It's pretty high. Part of it I think is you are bringing over the right property. Again, you see what's going on, you say I've got all these different options. Based on my experience, I think this is so, we're already getting properties that are the right fit. But beyond that, a lot of what this turns into is the everyday hustle of doing our job, responding promptly, exposing the property to as wide of a marketplace as possible. You're getting 2 teams. 100%.
I completely agree with what you're saying there, and I think that in general, getting into investments, like, just you have to know what you're doing, and it includes working with other people, knowing the right vendors, being in the market. I mean, being in the market for 101 years, quite a bit of vendors and banks and all of that, and that really gives value to owners. And, like, kinda like what we do when we partner up, right? We'll put it on all our platforms, and we'll get mass emails and our social media and all the buyers we work with, and same with you guys, the mass emails and everything. And I think it's very valuable for an owner that is not sure, have a conversation, see what's the best route for you, And, there's definitely cases where it's very important to auction, and there's some cases where it might be worth doing that more prolonged process to possibly get even a higher offer. I think there's value to both depending on where you are at.
Yeah, it goes both way. I mean, I think sometimes at auctions, a lot of times buyers will ask me, "Well, can I get a good deal at auction?" And the answer is yes, but you could also get a good deal at brokerage. I mean, I feel like a lot of times buyers will say, "Well, I can get it cheaper at auction." I've seen properties sell for crazy prices where in my head I'm like, what's going on here? I cannot believe how far off I am on the value. The sellers don't get upset because it's going higher. Yeah, I'm sure the same thing happens on brokerage. Sometimes it goes for a lot more and there was a bidding war, and sometimes it goes for less. So, uh, yeah, to me, the auction is more about a tool and the methodology than the price. I don't necessarily think that it goes from there or less, but I do think some properties would do better, and some scenarios do better, in brokerage for sure. Be the first to admit that. You can auction anything, but it may not be the best move, depending on what the property is. Sure.
100%. Now, I don't know if you believe it. We've probably been here already for a good half hour, 40 minutes. And it
Yep.
doesn't feel like it, by the way. Every time I sit down with people, they're like, what are you talking about? 40 minutes? You look at your clock and they're like, it's been 40 minutes.
Yeah.
With that, I really wanted to make sure if there's any highlights and high value items that you really wanted to bring up. I know you've been doing this for so long. There must be something that you wanted to share or ask or anything.
Yeah, I mean, I think I do want to just differentiate between the voluntary auctions and the foreclosure auctions, just to make sure the audience understands that, because that's a educational item that I typically have to spend time on, just as people get introduced to our platform. So Alex Cooper does two types of auctions. We do the foreclosure auctions, and then we do the voluntary auctions. The foreclosure auctions, we are a subcontractor, really, of the trustee that's been hired by the lender to foreclose on the property. And we will put the property on our platform, and we will conduct those auctions at the courthouse. Now, keep in mind, those properties can have IRS liens. They may not be the first mortgage. One thing of very large importance, the risk of loss. So when you buy a contract, typically, when you buy a property, the contract typically stipulates that it's the owner's problem until it closes, and then it becomes the buyer's problem once they own it, because now they're the owner. With a foreclosure, those contracts, I mean, I'd say 100% of them, I've never seen anything otherwise, say that risk of loss is with the buyer
Wow.
from the date of sale, the date of the auction. And you may be buying a property that you have to evict the occupants or occupant potentially at the end of it. Possession is not guaranteed. Ownership you'll get, but that doesn't mean that you're going to get access and possession of your property. And the tenants have rights, and especially if you're in DC, we do foreclosures in Maryland and DC, and DC is quite a different beast. There could be there's whole professionals that's their career is focusing on that. So, just be aware of all that. Just like everything else, doesn't mean that you can't get a good deal. But there is different risks involved with it for financing, because you don't have possession. You're not going to be able to get an appraiser in that property, and most lenders will not allow you to get a loan unless you have an appraisal. So, just because you have a pre-approval letter from your lender, if they're not a private money lender that knows specifically that you're buying a foreclosure, you're probably going to have to purchase the property in cash.
How would that work when it comes to that process? You go under contract with the courthouse?
Yes.
So then,
You don't have to wait for the sale to be ratified as any of those.
and then you have like 24 hours to send in the EMD, I guess?
No, you have to give an EMD right then and there,
Certified check?
a certified check. And then sometimes that's it. And sometimes within 1 or 2 business days, you have to increase it. Every ad's different.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
That's very different. Yeah, you have to be very, very aware because then, like you said, the liens are on the buyer. Any other lien, I'm assuming. You're not buying
No, no, the monetary lien, a foreclosure, unless you're buying a mortgage if the foreclosure is on the first deed of trust, the first mortgage, first position, it will wipe out other mortgages. And actually, if you're doing a condo foreclosure, which is a type of foreclosure that we do, that will actually knock out lenders too. Condo, pay your condo fees. You will get foreclosed upon. So,
I mean, I know HOA fees will knock out lenders.
I don't know about HOA because I had not done HOA foreclosures, but condo foreclosures, yes. Really? Yes.
That is very interesting.
Yes.
That's a risky business for a lender to land on that.
Um, as long as you pay your condo fees, it's not. I mean, that's why a lot of time with the lenders, they put the pity and they put the condo fee, in the loan.
Which is probably also I've dealt with condos before and searching condo complexes. Lenders will not lend on them.
If they don't meet Fannie Freddie standards, yes. If there's a certain percentage of occupancy
See.
that is not owner versus rental, yes. But you can get buildings Fannie Freddie approved. But there was a lot that are not.
Right, right. And I had a deal fault that fell apart and we had to sell it for cash because that building did not
Yep.
qualify. Wow. That's very, very good update. And I guess there is no way you would stumble on a foreclosure property bidding on your website. You'd have to actually physically be there.
It's not like you'd have to be at the courthouse, correct? But you'll see on our website, it will either be under the foreclosure list section or it will say substitute trustees auction or trustees auction.
Right.
So the voluntary auctions is basically instead of doing a traditional brokerage sale, you're doing a auction.
Right.
And we have access to the property. We take photos. We do guided tours typically. Because the buyers are purchasing the property as is, we are really on top of getting the diligence package because there's no study period. Your study period's now. So we're asking you to pull the trigger and go hard on your deposit the moment you win the auction. So we include leases, lead certs, multifamily dwelling license, payment history. I mean, we put, the rent roll, we put all that in there. Now we do redact the personally identifying information of the tenants because we've had unscrupulous people contact the tenant. So we've done that, but as far as making a financial decision, all the information that you would need that you would really typically do during a study period is done up front. I really try to take photos of every unit. I try to take photos of um, electrical boxes. I try to put in what the amperage is of electrical service. I say, this is how the utilities are split. I'll take photo, meaning is it landlord paid or is it tenant paid?
How many meters?
If,
Yeah.
if I take pictures of the air handlers, pictures of just sump pumps. I mean, pictures of French drains, pictures of basements, a lot of non-sexy pictures. But I guess beauty is in the eye of the beholder. If you see a really nice looking sump pump, or you see a you see an electrical box, and it doesn't say Federal Pacific on it, yep, it might look very beautiful to you. So, a lot of times for photographers, we have our own in-house photographer, but we use Roz a lot to take photos. He's a shout out to Roz. He does a great
That
job.
guy. Yeah.
Phenomenal.
It's great.
If you're looking to rent your listing or sell it or whatever, you use him. He's great.
Yeah, yeah.
But I've had to kind of train him if he's going to take the photos because he does take better photos than us. But is he taking the photos of the things that you need?
Yeah.
Look, it's great to see a kitchen, it's great to see a bathroom, but do I have to is this a 20-year-old HVAC system or is this a 5-year-old HVAC system?
Right.
What is it? I mean, there's buildings, especially in Baltimore, that still have the
Knob and tubes.
knob and tube fuse. I mean,
Yeah.
it's problematic. Well, again, doesn't mean you can't buy it with that in mind, but you need to know.
Correct.
You need to know these things, in my opinion. So we take all these photos and sellers are kind of like, you want to get into every unit, and I'm like, every unit, because if you're a buyer and let's say it's a 7-unit building and one of them is looks like a wrecking ball went through it, and you don't take into account that, it's a major problem. It ruins your numbers.
Correct.
So we don't look for any surprises. If there's something ugly, I'm gonna show it to you because you need to know it. I mean, and we're not perfect, but we do put our brand behind that, and I do think that there's a lot of buyers that will buy our property sight unseen because they know that that's what we're trying to accomplish. I still say buyer beware. I'm not when we yeah, I can't give you a guarantee because that's not what the purchase agreement is. But I really do want to show you everything about the property, good and ugly.
Correct. That's that is something different in a sense that most brokers probably just post the nice photos and call it a day when it comes.
I mean, but the buyer doesn't have the luxury of the time. I mean, we're
Inspections.
the seller is looking. Well, you can do inspections. I mean, yeah, a lot of buyers, to the guided tours or do a private tour, they can bring in a contractor. I mean, just because it's as is doesn't mean it's not an open book.
Right.
But the idea from the seller's perspective when they're at that moment of truth at the auction and it ends and they accept that high bid is it's done. They have the surety of the deal being done. It's not going to be retraded. It's not going to be redone. And so I have to explain to sellers sometimes because they do are like, wow, this is kind of an overwhelming amount of information that you're asking for me. And we're just going to be giving this to people. I'm like, well, how do you expect somebody to make a decision that those terms if they don't have that information. But I do think a nice thing about that is, hopefully we're doing most of the heavy lifting for you. You should still do your own diligence, but hopefully we're doing most of the heavy lifting and it allows you to underwrite the auction and participate at a level that, is aggressive because that is what you need to do. And yeah, there's only going to be one person that wins.
100%. And I think that's very much important, and I think we also started doing that with our listings. Like, I take a good 2, 3 weeks to before I list anything these days to get a phone call with them, get all the information on everything.
To like, oh, I don't have a lease. I don't have a multifamily dwelling license. Oh, I can still sell it, but it's very problematic because if the new owner needs to, let's talk about Baltimore City. If the new owner needs to file an eviction,
Yeah.
the very first thing the courthouse is going to ask is, show me your multifamily dwelling license and show me your lease certificate and show me your lease.
Correct. And I think it saves everyone so much time in the long run. I don't have to call them every 5 minutes for more information. I just have it already, and I don't have to bother anyone.
Yeah.
So, that was so that's very important.
And we can still sell it if you don't have that. We can still sell it, but it will bring less. And the buyer needs to know so that way when they're making their determination, I mean, a lot of property that we do sell does have a lot of problems with it. And there are buyers that look for value add opportunities and they're comfortable buying it as is and they know what they need to do to get it done. And sometimes a seller might be in a position where they just need to move on. How long do you want to put good money after bad or what is the value of your time or you know, you want to win more than you lose, but not every deal is going to be a winner.
Correct.
Uh,
100%.
I wish it was. Look at the stock market. It doesn't always go up.
No.
I joke. My uncle Paul has a great. He's the president of the company. I call him Uncle Paul. But he has a great saying that he says every once in a while when he gets a little frustrated. Where he'll say there's no 11th commandment that says thou shalt always make money on my real estate deals. It doesn't exist. Even no 11th commandment that says that. So um, you know. That's going back to the nuts and bolts of the auction. I mean that really going back. You said why do I think 2005 will never be repeated? I was showing front photos of a property, didn't have Reese's, didn't have interior photos, didn't have anything, and people were just buying them, and then lenders were financing them.
That's crazy. The lender financing part. I mean, buyers buying, I've seen crazy stuff, and it is pretty crazy, but lender financing, and I think that's when 2008 really, knocked in. And even today, I still not the same level, but I still think there was a lot of crazy things that went on in 2021 and 2022, and I guess 2020 as well, that things are about to, I'm seeing properties that not all properties, just like in 2008, I don't think all properties took a hit, but I'm seeing a lot of properties that
Well, when I go to sell and we're doing valuation, I'm sure you get this a lot as a broker. People ask me, well, how's the market? How's it going? Is it frothy? Is it quiet? What are you seeing? And again, the great thing about multifamily, we sell more than multifamily, so I feel that I get exposed to a lot. But me specifically, my practice at Alex Cooper, that's actually selling property versus management, I specifically kind of do multifamily. And I've always found that buyers come. I mean, for multifamily, if you can get positive cash flow out of a property and you can sell it where somebody can have a reasonable investment. I'm not talking about giving it away where somebody has to make a steal. Like multifamily property is a fairly liquid asset. There are always people looking to get into multifamily or expand their portfolio or whatever it may be. I mean, there's plenty of banks that would give loans for it. Like, you know, if you're risk adverse, I'd say as far as real estate goes, it's a fairly safe investment. I think the risk is more related to the management of it than than anything. I mean, I think that's probably where the risk lies. But there's eh, people are paying their rents, and the properties generate revenue. So I think uh, that's why I love multifamily, and people come from all over to buy it. I mean, the bigger the asset, the bigger the geographic pool that we can get. It's just I don't know. I really I know that you midfield's like specifically. I mean, I know you dabble in some other stuff, but primarily your single family and multifamily, right?
Yeah, still valid portfolios and multifamily. Yeah, it's what we focus on, and it's the same reason. And still, people ask me, and the reason is because the first thing anyone's going to need is a place to live.
Right.
Before retail, before industrial, and retail industrial in a sense is commodity in comparison. So that's why I believe that if multifamily market in the area is really shot, likely the rest of the markets is also shot. Because who's your employees in these industrial buildings? Who's coming to buy at your retail shops if no one lives there? Right. Right. So that's why I think it's a focus of ours as well. Um,
Yeah. Yeah. I love it.
as
It's
a yeah, it's really good. But it's really been a pleasure. I feel like we could probably go on. We could do like a 24 hour, and no joke. I mean, I feel like we could probably do this for forever. It's really really great having you on. Yeah, thank you for having me. It's been a pleasure, and we're gonna be doing. Look out for us. We're gonna be doing a lot more transactions. God willing, we're gonna be bringing one soon. Hopefully, two actually. So look out and bid if the deal works for you. And if it doesn't, please don't bid.
make good decisions.
Don't bid. We don't want to have to see you come back in 2 years to do an auction.
Absolutely not. Thank you so much, Matt. You have a good one.
Thank you, guys.